Welcome to this week's Vanderbilt football pregame show on the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Billy Derrick. This week, it's Vanderbilt and Alabama. Number 16 Vanderbilt at number 10 Alabama. The first time these two teams have met when they're ranked in a very long time. So we're here to talk about all of it. We've got three great guests coming your way. Robbie Weinstein will check in, our recruiting analyst, and obviously still doing some football coverage. We'll preview the matchup with Robbie. Also, a visit from Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South. He wrote a great piece this past week detailing the success that Vanderbilt has had the last couple of years and the fact that, hey, this isn't just about Alabama this week. This is about Vanderbilt. Let's take a moment to soak this in for Vanderbilt's program and their fan base and everyone associated with the program and in the city of Nashville, too. To embrace this. So great conversation with Connor O'Gara. And then we wrap it up with a visit from Mike Rodak, Alabama reporter from Vandy247. We preview it from the Alabama side of things. So stay tuned for that. Before we get into anything, though, I want to tell you about our presenting football sponsor, Bulovas Wealth Management of Raymond James. If there's one thing we all share, it's that our lives are all unique. At Raymond James, they believe that's worth celebrating because financial planning isn't just about numbers and figures. It's about creating the life that you envision. So whether you're building a future or preparing for retirement, a Raymond James financial advisor can guide you each step of the way. And that is Joe Bulovas, Big Leg Joe. He'll be in Tuscaloosa actually for the game as well. All while following a plan that's uniquely yours. That's life well planned. To learn more, and if this interests you, which it should, call Joe Bulovas with Bulovas Wealth Management of Raymond James. His number 615-645-6742, or log on to his website, raymondjames.com/Bulovas Wealth Management. Raymond James Associates Incorporated, member New York Stock Exchange, SIPC. I also want to tell you about another sponsor, FanDuel. And I mentioned the line earlier. Alabama is a 10.5-point favorite over the Commodores. The over-under, last I checked, was 55.5. Let's do another look-see here. Obviously, Vanderbilt, it's 51 straight times that Vanderbilt has been an underdog in an SEC game, which is ridiculous, actually. That should change this year. But again, Alabama is still a 10.5-point favorite, according to FanDuel. The over-under at 55.5. I might take that over. I think that over would be a pretty safe bet. You can get Vandy on the money line at plus 320. So, for example, you throw $10 on Vandy's money line, you're coming away with $32. So, pretty good value there. Not the best value on Alabama, but if you're confident in Vandy, throw some money on the money line, and you will win some money back. They've got first half spreads, second quarter spreads, all kinds of different bets. You can do the alternate spread. So if you're feeling really good about Vanderbilt, you could take them, plus 2.5 or plus 1.5. You can do the winning margin, all kinds of different bets. Head on over to FanDuel to place your bet right now. Also, again, I want to tell you about our basketball sponsors. Some good basketball news coming out with the Nashville Basketball Initiative, doing some great things with Coach Byington's program. All of our basketball coverage brought to you by the Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Well, let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. With 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area, simply drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants will return it to you with one thing you can never have enough of, your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh and clean laundry, ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. All right, this week, again, it's number 16 Vanderbilt, plus 10.5 at number 10 Alabama, 2:30 p.m. Central Time kickoff at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa. You can watch it on ABC. Sean McDonough, Greg McElroy, and Molly McGrath will be on the call. If you're not able to make it to the game, if you're driving around town in Nashville, tune in to 102.5 The Game for Andrew Allegretta, Norman Jordan, and Kevin Ingram on the call. Vandy's off to a 5-0 start for the first time since 2008 and just the second time in 80 years. A lot of history being made here, especially the last few weeks and really this entire season. And obviously we'll be featured on College Game Day for just the second time ever. And I think I saw that Alabama has been featured 51 times. It's just the second time Vandy's been featured. Of course, the last time was 2008 when Auburn came to town. Vandy was 5-0. They're ranked number 19. They beat Auburn 14-13. Bobby Johnson was the head coach. Everybody remembers that. That's the last time Vandy was featured on College Game Day. So there's going to be a lot of talk, a lot of interviews, a lot of coverage that Vanderbilt doesn't typically get on College Game Day that you should be watching. You should be getting up at 8 o'clock Central and tuning into the entirety of that show because you never know when you'll have a feature and what McAfee will say about the team and who they're going to pick and things of that nature. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun day. It's going to be a fun day. It's going to be fun to watch game day. It's going to be fun to watch this game because I think it is going to be an instant classic. This is the first ranked matchup between Vandy and Alabama, like I said, since 1937, which is another incredible stat. Vandy has won each of his first 5 games this season by 20-plus points for the first time since 1915. Not even sure who the president was there, but and my grandparent wasn't even a thought to be on this earth. The Commodores are one of 5 teams nationally and 4 in the Power 4 ranked in the top 20 nationally in rushing offense and defense. You got BYU, Indiana, James Madison, and Missouri. So top 20 in rushing offense and rushing defense. So the Commodores have been running the ball really well, and they've been stopping the run really well. Going to have to continue that, obviously, in Tuscaloosa. After last year's historic win over Alabama, obviously the rest of the country finally took notice of what Clark Lee and company had cooking on West End. For those inside the program, though, one game doesn't define a season, and that's the same message going into Saturday's game in Tuscaloosa from head coach Clark Lee. He talked about that a little bit earlier this week. Take a listen.
I mean, because it's just, I think the things that could bring up are distractions, or complacency or a sense of arrival. And, I think the team kind of gets revealed over the course of a season to the outside world, but we like methodically and intentionally build it for the entirety of the year internally. And, even like we don't distill the success of a year down to one game. We're looking for 12 climbs plus what awaits us after the postseason. So ultimately, we left a year ago not satisfied, feeling like there was more for us to accomplish. And this year, we've put a lot into every day up until this point. And so we keep our heads down and we keep going to work. And we'll do that no matter the outcome of any of our games. This is about finding a program's potential. This is about playing into January. And to do that, you have to have an incredible ability to focus in the moment. And so it is very purposeful and intentional, the messaging and the focus I have to bring as the head coach, the staff has to bring every day, and the players too. In our environment, we just don't get distracted by much.
That's Vanderbilt head coach Clark Lee. Great message and a good point in that, look, last year doesn't have any bearing on this year. Both teams are different. Vanderbilt's better. Alabama's better. Both offenses look different too. I think that's something we'll get into a little bit later in the show with a couple of our guests, with Ty Simpson airing it out. Last year, Milroe didn't necessarily have that capability of sitting in the pocket and dicing you up. And on the Vanderbilt side, Pavia is dropping back and dicing teams up as well, a lot more than he was last year. So both offenses a little bit different. So no bearing on this season, and it adds distractions, like Clark Lee said, if you start to think about last year's game. All right, the series history is interesting. The Vandy's last win over the Crimson Tide in Alabama occurred in 1950 when the two teams met in Mobile, Alabama. The Tide lead the all-time series 60-20-4. Not as bad as I thought. It was just the last win was 1984 for Vanderbilt before last season. Of course, last year's loss in Nashville snapped that 23-game winning streak. This game will be the 87th meeting between the two teams since 1903. So they've played a lot, and really going back to the 70s and 80s, and even before then was a big rivalry. And Vanderbilt would win some games, Alabama would win some games, and they played obviously a lot in Birmingham. But this is a game that traditionally there was some expectation and excitement for. Obviously, that toned down a little bit when Alabama won 23 straight. Both teams, like I said earlier, will be ranked entering this game for the first time since the 30s as well. Vandy will be looking for its second straight win over Alabama after knocking them off last year, who was ranked number 1 at First Bank Stadium last season. Vandy's last win in Tuscaloosa came, of course, back in 1984. So all kinds of history to keep in mind this weekend for the Commodores. Of course, last week, Vandy's coming off a win over Utah State, 55-35. Pavia, 5 touchdown passes through the air. He ran for a score. Also, he was 26-34, 321 yards. He also rushed for 79 yards, and he became the second Vandy quarterback since 1996 to finish with 6 or more touchdowns in a game, and tied the program's single-game passing touchdown record, joining Johnny McCrary in 2014, Jay Cutler in 2005, and Bill Wade in 1950. So Pavia's inching closer to history, and I got a feeling he'll continue getting closer to that all-time passing touchdown record and passing yards as well. It's going to be tough to pass Shermer, of course, there and Cutler, but he's going to keep inching closer. Junior Sherrill obviously had a huge day, 91 yards receiving, 3 touchdown passes. It was the first time Sherrill had scored more than just 1 touchdown in a game. So definitely the best game of his career. He said that after the game last week. Eli Stowers and Richie Hoskins also caught touchdown passes, and MK Young also ran for a touchdown as well. The defense for Vanderbilt pressured Bryson Barnes throughout the game. They sacked him 3 times and forced 7 quarterback hurries. Obviously, Corday Sender's a big part of that, and Miles Capers as well has been tremendous. Speaking of the defense, this is an important game for Vanderbilt safeties and the entire secondary. The entire defense, obviously, but some concerns, especially after what we saw from Bryson Barnes through the air in that first half, of what Ty Simpson could potentially do on Saturday. After the game against Utah State, Marlon Sewell, of course, an Alabama native from Birmingham, he gets to come back home and play in his home state. He said that eye discipline will be key heading into the Alabama matchup. Like I said, he's from Birmingham, Alabama, and I had a chance to catch up with Marlon Sewell earlier this week. Take a listen. Marlon, I want to start with just this season as a whole. What's it been like being a part of this defense and playing under Steve Gregory? Obviously, he called the second half of last season, but has it been just, continuing to learn under, what he wants to do defensively?
Yeah, so, we basically kept the same defense from last year, whether that's between Coach Lee and Coach Gregory. They're similar in play calling, so I think it was just good and it's fun to have a similar defense, same defense, running for 2 years, making guys more comfortable in the pass game, the run game. So with it just being the next year, I think we're just being comfortable and flying around having fun.
You talked about eye discipline after the game last week against Utah State. Obviously, they got some things going on you guys in the first half specifically. Y'all settled into the game, but what did you see in film in that Utah State game where you guys needed to clean up heading into Alabama?
I'll just say formation and recognition. Utah State is obviously different than Alabama, but Utah State gave us a lot of eye candy, which forces us to have more eye discipline. So moving forward, we're just going to hone in on having more disciplined eyes on teams moving forward, because when a team studies film, they're going to look at the plays that we maybe weren't undisciplined on, and they can possibly do those plays. So
you talk about Alabama and obviously receivers like Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard and Isaiah Horton and some tight ends and running backs. What do you guys have to key on heading into this week, specifically with that Alabama offense?
Yeah, it's a great group of receivers, and the main thing is, as a safety group, we just don't want to let any balls get behind us. We know they can be explosive at times. We just want to try to capture shots, stop the run, and they have a great quarterback, so we just want to hone in on that and just keep studying and get whatever keys we can get to, just stop their offense.
You talk about capping the shots. What does that look like defensively? Obviously you don't want to give up deep throws, but, how do you kind of make sure you're reading that where you're not staying back too far, but you're also looking at the run and some of the short throws as well?
That goes back to eye discipline and, just formation recognition. When you see a formation that we practiced all week or seen on film, you can just anticipate the route combination they may give us and, just be ready. They could change things up just like we can change things up, but, just having that anticipation on the route concept they may give us.
You've been here a while now, and you've played at Alabama before. They haven't gone well for you guys. Does it feel a little bit different this year going into this one with college game day and a lot of hype and excitement about it?
Yeah, man, it's exciting, but it's a lot of external. We want to focus on the internal, It's great that I've been here a long time. We were winning and everything, and people are starting to take notice. But we don't want to get too high or get too low. We just want to stay in the middle, remain the same, and just play our game.
You're from Birmingham, not far from Tuscaloosa. Did you have to ask for some extra tickets this week?
Yeah, I had to ask for a lot. I actually had to tell some of my family members they couldn't come because it's just too many. I couldn't get it, but, they'll be watching.
You guys played in Birmingham in the bowl game last year. You get to play in Tuscaloosa now again, last time. What's it like going home and seeing people, seeing friends, seeing family, and especially being on a stage like this and close to your hometown?
I mean, it's exciting because a lot of people really just watch me on TV at home, and having a chance to come and watch me play in person, probably since the first time since high school, potentially, it's just fun and exciting just to see some old friends and potentially old coaches, and, I just want to put on for the city.
Last thing, what are a few keys defensively? You talked about capping the shots, but what are a couple other things you guys have to key in on, when you go into this game?
I'll just say, just keep it simple. Focus on execution. That's what we hone in on all week. Just focusing on your technique, focusing on the play, focusing on offense, and, just executing the play when it comes to you. So that's two things I say we do that, and going in, we're going to be a great defense.
Marlon, thanks for the time. Good luck on Saturday.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you.
That's Vanderbilt safety Marlon Sewell, an original Derek Mason recruit. He's been here for a long time, and he knows the defense, but he's got an important job on Saturday to have eye discipline and to continue to play well on the back end of that Vanderbilt defense. Not to mention guys like Randon Fontenette, C.J. Hurd. All the defensive backs are going to have to step up their game because this is a new challenge this season. You're facing Ty Simpson and three really, really good receivers. A good tight end, Josh Cuevas, as well. Good running back. We'll get more into that Alabama offense. Obviously, the Crimson Tide opened this season with a loss in Tallahassee, 31-17 to Thomas Castellanos and Gus Malzahn. They had it rolling there in Tallahassee, and Alabama struggled. And so they start the season 0-1, but they've strung off 3 straight wins. UL Monroe, 73-0. Wisconsin at home, 38-14. I know those teams aren't very good, but they did go to Georgia and win last week, 24-21. Bulldogs, we know how good they are. Simpson passed for 276 yards and 2 touchdowns and ran for a score as the Tide held on late to beat the Bulldogs on Saturday night. They handed Georgia their first home loss in 6 years. So that's impressive. That was a really impressive win for Kalen DeBoer and company. Alabama has won 3 straight since opening the season, like I said, with that loss to Florida State. Led by Simpson, they won the game on third downs on both sides of the ball. The offense converted 12 of 19 third downs while holding the Bulldogs to only 2 successful conversions on 8 attempts. So that's something to watch. Third downs on both sides of the football for both teams. Who wins third downs is probably going to win this game. Also, the quarterback battle is interesting. We're going to get more into Diego Pavia and his success a little bit later with a couple of our guests, but Ty Simpson is obviously the guy to watch. He's the straw that stirs the drink for Bama's offense. And this Alabama offense averaging 38 points per game, 322 passing yards per game. That's third in the SEC. The only Power 4 team without a turnover this season, Alabama, is +7 in turnover margin. They have not turned the ball over yet. So knock on wood if you're an Alabama fan, but that's really impressive as well. Something they struggled with last year, especially early in that Vanderbilt game. You had the pick six from Fontenette on Milroe, and then late you had the forced fumble, the strip sack from Capers that was huge. So 2 huge turnovers in that game that really flipped it and gave Vanderbilt momentum. That's going to be a key for Alabama taking care of the football. Like I mentioned, Ty Simpson, 11 touchdown passes so far. He hasn't thrown an interception as a first-year starter. He's a first-year starter, but he's been at Alabama for 4 years. So he's sat there. He's waited his turn. Obviously, he's the son of Jason Simpson, who's the head coach at UT Martin, played at Westview, Tennessee, West Tennessee guy. This will be fun to see this matchup. He's completing throws at a 69% clip. So, I mean, you can't dispute the stats, the numbers there for Simpson. He's been phenomenal. We got a few really, really good running backs. Kevin Riley is their leading rusher so far this year, 150 yards. Jam Miller was banged up to start the season, but he's now back, played well last week, and he'll be getting back into the fold more. Richard Young, another young guy, but those are all 3 guys to watch in the running game. And we know about the receivers, Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton. This triple threat for the Tide have combined for 9 total touchdowns. So those are the guys to watch out for on offense. On defense, Alabama's given up 113 passing yards per game. That's least in the SEC. So this has been a good Alabama pass defense. But but they're giving up 160 rushing yards per game. That's toward the bottom of the conference. So they're giving up some rushing yards. We saw what happened against Thomas Castellanos and that run-heavy scheme for Florida State. They slowed the game down, and they just pounded Alabama, especially on that offensive line. But Kalen DeBoer is 0-4 against running quarterbacks in his career as a head coach. And again, that's sort of hearsay, but go look it up. DeBoer has struggled against running quarterbacks. A lot of teams have struggled against running quarterbacks. But again, this is a huge game for Kane Womack in this Alabama defense. Defensive back Bray Hubbard is a guy to watch. He leads the team with 17 tackles, 2 interceptions. He had a forced fumble last week against Georgia. So again, if you're Vanderbilt's offense, you got to take care of the football and keep an eye on Hubbard. And then defensive tackle LT Overton, 1.5 sacks this season. Another guy to watch coming off the line of scrimmage there. Like I said, Vandy's rushing attack against Alabama's run defense is going to be critical in this game. Alabama gave up 227 yards to Georgia last week, much of it on the perimeter, which has been a sore spot for them under defensive coordinator Kane Womack. Running the ball is what Vandy does best, obviously, and its offense is plenty dangerous on the edges where Alabama struggles. So that's the area of your Vanderbilt's offense to attack the perimeter. Pavia will probably run more than he has this season in any other game. Vanderbilt will likely try to slow the game down and keep the ball out of the hands of the Alabama offense. And how you do that is put yourself in third and manageable and convert those third downs. Last season in this game, Vanderbilt was 12 of 18 on third downs. I don't know that you have to be that good again this year because I think Vanderbilt's better overall, but Alabama's offense is better as well. So you probably need to be similar in terms of converting on third down because Alabama, they did the same exact thing last week against Georgia. They converted on third downs. These, like I said, they're two of the highest. They are the 2 highest pass efficiency teams in the SEC. So it's probably a safe bet to say there will be a lot of points scored in this one. And like I said, take the over. I think that's a pretty. And I know I said Vanderbilt's going to slow the game down, but I do still think at the end of the day there's going to be some points scored in this game by both teams. So again, looking forward to it. In terms of the injury report, before we get to our guest portion here. We'll start with Vanderbilt. Defensive back Marlon Jones is out. Running back Chase Gillespie is out. I don't think he's played at all this season anyway. Braille Lipford, reserve safety, is out. Doesn't matter. Linebacker Jamison Curtis is out. I don't think Curtis was a guy that was going to play, but he's been good on special teams this year, so that's a little disappointing. And then questionable Mark Davis, and that hurts because with Marlon Jones already being out, you don't want to have Mark Davis out as well, but he is questionable. So Clark said a couple of days ago that Mark should be able to give it a go. We'll see how he progresses. And then Issa Wataha is doubtful, and that's disappointing. Again, these can change. There's another one. I'm recording this Friday morning. This could change tonight, so check it. Just search SEC availability report tonight at 7:00, and it could change. And then the final one is Saturday morning, actually. So tomorrow morning you can check that as well. But for Alabama, theirs is more impactful. They've got a bunch of defensive guys that are going to be out. A couple of linebackers, Quay Russaw and Jamarian Latham, and then defensive lineman Jeremiah Beeman. All 3 of those guys are out. And then James Smith is out for the first half of the game, defensive lineman, for a targeting call against Georgia. So Alabama defensively, especially in that first half with Smith out as well, could have some struggling points there. And again, I think it's key for Vanderbilt's offense to start fast. And I think that's a reason why. So that's what we got on the latest injury report. And I want to mention one more thing before we get to the interview portion. Diego Pavia was asked earlier this week by Chris Lowe, who wrote a really good piece on 3 previewing the game. And Pavia said, in quote, "I don't know what they're doing. I just focus on us, but I know we've got to bring it. That's for sure. The crowd, I think, is going to be a big factor in the game, but we just got to play within the white lines. If we do that, if we play our game, it won't be close." Imagine telling someone even 2-3 years ago a Vanderbilt quarterback would be making that statement about a game in Tuscaloosa. That's where we're at with this program. Should be fun to see on Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC, Vanderbilt and Alabama. Well, we're not done yet, guys. It's probably our most loaded pregame show of the year, as it should be for the biggest game in the history of this program. We started off with Robbie Weinstein from Vandy, right here at Vandy247, preview the entire game from the Vandy perspective, and Robbie gives his prediction that I think you guys are going to like. And then we roll into a great interview with Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South, who wrote a great piece on Vanderbilt and basically saying, hey, let's take a look at what Vanderbilt's doing right now. So I think y'all are going to like that one. And then we close it out with Behind Enemy Lines, Mike Rodak from Vandy247. He gives us the Alabama perspective on the matchup. So let's roll in without further ado to our interview portion of the show. And we kick it off with our guy, Robbie Weinstein. Robbie, I want to start here with the matchup that you're most looking forward to watching. To me, it's Vanderbilt's secondary against Alabama's skill position players. I think that is as important as any matchup in this game, and I think it's the matchup in this game. Would you agree with that? And if not, what are some other things you're going to be keying on in this game, saying, hey, if this happens, I could see Vandy winning this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be the most important matchup. I personally don't think it's going to go very well for Vandy. And so I don't know if that's like I don't have high hopes for them in that area, but I think they could win the game despite that. So maybe something that if I could name a different matchup that I think is also going to be very important. Vandy has really improved the defensive line over the last couple of years. Of course, last year they were tough against the run, but didn't get much of a pass rush. I think this season so far, they've shown a little bit of both. And probably something that we haven't talked that much about amid the offense just scoring 1 billion points every game is that Corday Sidnor and Miles Capers in particular on the edge are having really good seasons. And I know that it doesn't show up in terms of raw sack numbers, although Capers might have like 3, which is pretty good. But if you look, at advanced stats, like Pro Football Focus has the pressures basically, and both of them are getting a lot of pressures. They're pressuring the quarterback. They're not getting all the way there, but I think it's still valuable to at least cut short the amount of time that the quarterback can stand there in the pocket and pat the ball. And I think that's going to be a really interesting matchup to watch because Alabama has the huge, massive offensive line that they always do with 4- and 5-star former recruits. But Vandy has an experience edge and these edge defenders are playing well for them. So, I mean, if they can, as Clark Lee says, shorten the down and get to the quarterback and get some pressure on Simpson, then that would really help that secondary that is, I think going to have a tough test against those wide receivers.
Yeah, Capers 3.5 sacks. Zunk and Rinaldi both have 2. Sidnor with 1.5. And I mean, you've got a bunch of guys at 1 sack as well. And Robbie, there were seasons like Vandy's already at 14 sacks on the year. I mean, you've covered seasons where they've had 14 total.
I think that was as recently as 2 years ago. I'm pretty sure. Like this is not ancient history.
Right. So I agree with that. And that's something that we may not talk about or even think about a ton because we're not used to. Our brains are programmed for Vanderbilt not to put pressure on the quarterback, but they really have. But I want to kind of go back to the secondary, and I've had some questions about who's going to be on Ryan Williams, and Isaiah Horton is 6'3", and a local kid actually who I'm pretty sure you've covered. He's now at Alabama. He's kind of, I don't want to say late bloomer, but he's really developed into a physical presence and a guy that is sort of their red zone target that I don't know that Alabama had last year. But how do you look at the receiver? I know Vandy's going to rotate. There's not going to be one corner on each receiver at all times. But how do you think Coach Richardson and Gregory and Clark Lee will scheme up the DBs? Because, like you said, they're going to have to get creative.
Yeah, Jeremy Bernard is another wide receiver for Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got 3 very good ones, 3 who are, gosh, I mean, I'm trying to think through. They may be the best 3 wide receivers that Vandy has played all season. Vandy has faced some good quarterbacks. I mean, I think Utah State's quarterback performances, both from the starter Bryson Barnes and the backup Conover, were really impressive to me. But these wide receivers are different. I think I will be curious to see how much they challenge those guys. Are they going to play off? I don't think that's going to go well if they do that. I think you need to challenge them at least a little bit, and maybe you play the safeties back if you really want to make sure that you avoid the explosive touchdowns. But I think we've seen a lot of soft coverage from them, maybe less than in years past, but still decent amount. And
Mhm.
to be fair, a lot of that is like late in games that they're up by 30 or
Yeah.
40 points in. And so I get it. I understand why you
Right.
do that. That happened a lot against Utah State. So, I mean, it's going to be a really big test for like Colby Taylor and Martell Height. How much is he going to play offense versus defense in this game? I'm very interested to see that as well. With Taylor specifically, like he has the physical tools, I think, to hang with these guys. But
Mhm.
remember that last year penalties were the issue, and
Mhm.
so if you're trying to play really aggressive or relatively aggressive coverage with him, that's a test, right? He can't
Yeah.
grab, he can't hold, and to give him credit, in fall camp as well, he did a good job of not doing that. So I'm not saying he isn't capable of avoiding those penalties, but I think this introduces tension at that position and pressure that they haven't faced yet, just because this is by far the most talented receiving core that they've gone up against.
Robbie, Vandy's offense obviously is statistically one of the best in the country. So is Alabama's. Alabama is up there. I think, Vandy's at 49 points per game, fourth in the country, 86% red zone touchdown rate, third in the country, 8 yards per play, which is kind of ridiculous. Alabama not far behind in a lot of those. Are you in the opinion that Vanderbilt's offense can keep rolling and look pretty similar than, to how they've looked in these first 5 weeks? Obviously, Bama's defense is better than a lot of defenses they've faced, but Bama's defense has also struggled with running quarterbacks.
I think Vandy's going to keep rolling on offense. I do. They're not going to continue at this pace. They're not going to score 50 or 70 points against SEC teams. But I mean, I think they have so much margin when you're scoring 55 and 70. You can have a worse game and you're still in the 30s or 40s.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're 5 games in. I think we just have to go based off of what we've seen rather than what we expected coming into the season. And even coming into the season, I thought the offense would be very good, but maybe, they've been like elite, maybe even the best offense in the country so far. Alabama, their defensive line is kind of depleted heading into this game. I think Vandy is going to absolutely go off offensively in this game. I really do.
Yeah, and I'm with you. Those injuries that you're referencing, Quay Russo is out, Jamarian Latham is out as well, and then you've also got James Smith, a guy that'll be out for the first half.
Yeah, due to targeting. I mean, these are like serious issues. And remember, Vandy scored 40 points, or I suppose 33 points on offense against this defense last year. I know there's some changes. It's the transfer portal era, but they showed that they can play against a big, strong team, a big, strong defense that has all this talent. I think Alabama's gotten better, but I expect Vandy's offense to keep rolling. I don't think they're going to score 50 for sure. That's not going to happen in Tuscaloosa. But to me, the question is more like, is Vandy's defense going to be able to hold up? There's not really any reason for me to question the offense right now. There just isn't.
With College Game Day coming to town, obviously that is the second time Vandy's been featured in the game. I think Alabama's been featured over 50 times. So, for Alabama and their fans and their media and everybody around Alabama, that's nothing new. For Vanderbilt, I mean, this is objectively new. I mean, you have more interviews this week. You have more coverage. You have more eyes. How do you think Vandy handles that, Robbie? Because, I think it's one thing to go to Columbia and handle a tough road environment. But this is a game. This is the most hyped Vanderbilt football game of my lifetime. I mean, I think ever. So, like, how do you think this team handles that?
I think they'll be fine overall. I would say in terms of the road environment specifically, they've had a lot of penalties on the offensive line. And I get that when they're not committing penalties, they're playing pretty well, but they're committing a lot of penalties. And that is an area where, playing in a stadium with like 100,000 fans screaming at the top of their lungs, false starts are definitely in play. I mean, they've struggled with those at home sometimes. From a broader mindset standpoint, I just feel like this is the biggest spot they've been in, but, you can go back to like the Kentucky game last year where I think a lot of people thought maybe that was a letdown spot for Vandy, understandably, and they handled it and there's other examples too. If they weren't such a veteran team, I would be more maybe like keeping an eye on that. But they're just so old and mature, and the star quarterback, who's one of the best leaders in college football, is this force of personality who sets the tone from the top. I don't really have a lot of reason to think that they're suddenly gonna let their guard down or something, especially because, of course, they're going to be hyped to go play a road game at Alabama, and a road game at Alabama where people aren't just automatically writing them off. I mean, they're getting a good amount of respect. I know the Vegas line is double digits, but it came down like 4 points already, I think, from 14. Yeah. And from what I've watched, I've seen a lot of experts this week. They're like their best bet of the week is Vandy against the spread. I mean, they are getting some respect for sure.
Pavia, you mentioned him. He's plus 1,500 now, according to BetMGM on the Heisman odds. Ty Simpson's at plus 1,000. So he's tied for third with Jeremiah Smith. Pavia not far down the list. I've told people throughout the week that if Simpson wins, it's kind of ho-hum. Like, okay, Simpson probably won't move a ton either way in the Heisman voting. But if Pavia if Pavia loses, you may, I'm not saying forget about him, but he may fall further than Simpson. But if Pavia wins, I mean, he's got to be the guy, right? At least to this point, or at least one of the 3-4 guys, because he's already, top 10 in odds. How do you look at that?
Right? Yeah, I mean, I think you'll be if they pull it off. I think you'll be waking up on Sunday and looking at the odds, and he's number one probably. Having said that, this. At halfway through the season, I just think the odds swing so much from week to week.
Right.
Like Carson,
especially this year.
And then I haven't heard anything about him lately because I looked back and in his last 3 games, he has 3 touchdown passes or something. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean that much if Pavia is number one in the odds halfway through the season in terms of his chances to win it. But it is kind of fascinating just to think about that being realistic, as someone who has covered Vanderbilt for years.
Yeah. How surprised are you that Vanderbilt is in this spot, this 5-0 spot? Because I have talked about it with a lot of people, and I said, I think Vandy can get to 5-0. Carolina is obviously going to be a tough game, but we talked about the Blacksburg trips and the Columbia trip as really tough trips, and Vanderbilt made them look so easy that now what you're hearing a lot of is that, well, Virginia Tech's not that good. Well, they just went and beat NC State yesterday or Saturday, and we've seen what South Carolina has been, maybe not as good, but how surprised are you that they are at this point with this attention?
I thought there was a chance that they were. I was looking at the schedule in the offseason, and I was like, there's a okay chance that Vandy is 5-0 going into Alabama, and this game gets put on ABC and there's College Game Day. But I did not think that they would be beating teams by 30, 40, 50 points on the way to that 5-0 start. And that is really like the level of dominance, I think, is what has grabbed people's attention. A lot of teams can go 5-0 and skate by against, opponents that turn out to be overrated in the preseason. But, they went into Columbia and won by 24 points, and the Virginia Tech game, the second half is unlike anything we've ever seen really from Vanderbilt in one half of football. So, I mean, before the season, I thought I liked them to beat Virginia Tech, and I thought South Carolina was vastly overrated. But even, accounting for that, I thought that they were, even if that's a 7-5 team, Vandy has lost to worse South Carolina teams than that over the course of that streak, and it was a road game. So not stunned that they're here 5-0, but, just with the style of play for Vandy, like the, preference for a slow tempo and kind of entering the season with some unproven positions like the offensive line and maybe the defensive backs, or at least safeties to some extent, maybe even edge rushers a little bit. I didn't think they would be just completely clocking teams left and right like they have been.
All right, last thing here, Robbie. Got to get your prediction for Vandy, Alabama, 2:30 p.m. Central Time kick on ABC. What you got?
Yeah, I think, fans, who have followed the site for years probably have a pretty good idea that I think I'm pretty measured with these predictions. I actually picked a 1-point loss at South Carolina, even though going in I thought Vandy had played better to that point in the season. I think Vanderbilt is going to win this game, Billy. I'm picking Vanderbilt to win. I'm still deciding whether I think their final score is going to end with a 3 or a 4. Like, I think the offense, there's no evidence that anyone can stop them. And that doesn't mean they're going to go undefeated and win the national championship. Like, there's going to be an off game or two at some point, or, maybe they commit some turnovers. The penalties have been an issue. Maybe there are injuries. I don't know. But Alabama has some issues in their front seven right now. I think that Tim Beck has been able to call a very basic vanilla game the last 2 weeks and has saved a lot of tricks that he could use in this game. They haven't run any triple option or barely any. We haven't seen the Jerry Kill jumping up and down on the sideline as a distraction, fourth down trick play, nothing like that. We haven't seen Eli Stowers taking direct snaps. None of that. Nothing. Like, they have a lot that they can throw out there. Alabama, Kane Womack, I don't know if he can successfully coordinate a defense against this particular Vanderbilt team, because it seems like it's not a very good matchup for his coaching style and for the Alabama defense for whatever reason. I also think Alabama is going to score a lot of points in this one. I think I could see them really lighting it up through the air. Jam Miller is back at running back, and he's probably going to pose some issues. I like their tight end. So I think it's going to be a shootout, but I'll pick Vanderbilt. I mean, to some extent, Ty Simpson's playing really well, but I'm going to roll with who I think is the better quarterback.
There it is. Robbie Weinstein's got the doors.
I can't believe I'm saying it. I can't believe it, but I genuinely, and it's not like gold-colored glasses or I.
It's just from what you've seen.
They're going to win.
Yeah, and I was listening to Cover 3 podcast the other day. I heard Bud Elliott bring up, and I don't know that this is totally proven, but like anytime Kalen DeBoer has faced a running quarterback at Alabama, they're 0-4, 0-5 or something like he has.
Bad news, man. And I also think, I think Georgia's a good team, but the SEC, the top of the SEC just seems to have flattened so much. The Tennessee win for Georgia looks a little bit less good than it did at the time. Now that Tennessee, the Syracuse win has been devalued a little bit. They barely survived against Mississippi State, and you can make an argument, that State maybe should have won that game.
Yeah.
What have we seen this season to suggest that Vandy isn't on par with these teams? At this point in the season through 5 games, I think I just got to go with what my eyes are telling me.
There it is. You heard it for your first from Robbie Weinstein. We'll see what happens for Vandy and Alabama. Robbie, enjoy the game. It's should be a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of points, and I think it's going to be exciting and dramatic. So it's going to be a memorable one for the Vanderbilt fan base either way.
Absolutely. Thanks, Robbie.
Thank you.
Keeping this week's pregame show rolling with a visit from Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South, covers the SEC, and recently put out a tremendous article on Vanderbilt with the headline, "Can we just take a moment and process how incredible this moment in time is for the Vanderbilt Commodores?" So we'll talk a little bit about that, preview this matchup. But Connor, appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, good to be here, man. What a week. What a week for Vandy. A week that, I'll be honest, when I started doing this job about 10 years ago, there's just no way that I could have pictured this type of buildup, a world in which Vandy is the visiting team for College game day with Alabama. Like that's the world that we're living in right now, and it is very hard to believe.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody earlier today, and longtime Vanderbilt fan, and they told me that this is the first time that Vanderbilt has been a part of the game of the week. And yeah, you got FSU Miami, but the College game day game of the week happened in 2008 against Auburn, but at that point, Vanderbilt, obviously they started well, but didn't finish the season well. But this is a different feel, different type of team and different type of quarterback and all that. But up until this point of the season, what have you seen from this team that sort of inspires you to write an article about, about what you just did and kind of say, hey, let's put some shine on Vanderbilt?
I think a lot of people look at Vandy and all they see is Diego Pavia. Understandably so. He's the voice, he's the face. If you watch the Netflix special any given Saturday, he was Vandy's entire segment basically on it. And like this is in so many ways exactly what Vandy is needed for so long. But if it were just Diego Pavia, Vandy would not be 5-0, number 16 team in the country. And in my opinion, they deserve to be even higher. They are in this spot because they're an improved team that was eighth in the country in Bill Connolly's percentage of returning production. They are a team that defensively you could have had questions about coming into the year with the transition from Clark Lee stepping back into his head coaching role, passing the play calling duties to Steve Gregory, a guy that was, in the system obviously, but was considered very much an unknown. And that so far has looked really, really good. I mean, they're a yard and a half per play better defensively than they were last year. They were a little bit more bend but don't break last year than they kind of got credit for. And I think that you're seeing a team not have to necessarily rely on the turnover margin in the same way that they did last year. And so they just do all these things really, really well. Junior Sherrill is a great player. I shouldn't need to tell Alabama fans about that after what he did to them last year. I think that if you don't know who Eli Stowers is yet, you either don't pay attention to preseason All-Americans or you don't pay attention to the NFL draft because he's part of those conversations. And this is just a better team than it was last year. It doesn't mean that they're going to beat Alabama because they're a better team, but there are just a lot of different things that you can watch and appreciate. And when you clear out two hostile venues, and I realize that those were situations in which you're about to get a head coach fired in Brent Pry, and then you lose the starting quarterback in Lenore Sellers in that game. Like I realize you can kind of like make excuses for that. It's still no joke to clear out power conference venues like that. And Vandy was able to do that, and they should be very much in everybody's radar.
When you look at this matchup, obviously we know what Alabama did last week. We know what Vanderbilt has done so far this season. Do you think Vanderbilt's offense can continue to operate at the level they've been operating? And we know about Alabama's struggles with running quarterbacks, especially to start the season with Thomas Castellanos. And obviously Vanderbilt's not going to continue to roll on and average 50 points by the end of the season. But I guess to what degree do you think this Vanderbilt offense can continue to click similarly to how they have so far?
I think there's a lot of reason to believe that they'll fade, but not fade in the way that people expect them to. And let's remember last year, too, this offense faded down the stretch. And I kept pointing to the thing that I feel like nobody was bringing up. When Diego Pavia got his leg set on by Deion Walker against Kentucky, he became a more limited player. And it wasn't really until that bowl game against Georgia Tech in which you saw him rested looking like himself. And he's a wrestler. He's going to play through that stuff. He talked about, you're going to have to take off his leg for him not to be out there after what Jerry Kill and Tim Beck have done for him. So you can understand what he was playing through. He was not 100% down the stretch last year, or anywhere close to it, in my opinion, and limited their offense. They couldn't really stretch the field. Go back to what Tim Beck did so well against this Kane Womack defense. The biggest play of that game was that play action. It was over the top. It was to Junior Sherrill on that long touchdown, and it was the key play of the game in which you thought, oh my God, this might actually be happening. They can do things like that are going to keep even good, talented defenses on their heels. That's what they need to be able to do in this game on Saturday. And I do think that they do so many things pre-snap that confuse really good, respected defensive minds. Clayton White is no slouch on the defensive side of the ball. And what they were able to do to South Carolina, a new look South Carolina defense, but they had them just befuddled and basically just kind of thrown in the towel down the stretch in that game. So to me, I do think that there's a lot of reason to believe that this offense, especially if it can continue to get the non-Diego Pavia rushing options going, I do think that there's reasons to believe that this offense is not going to fade in the way that people might expect them to.
I keep hearing, throughout this week that, hey, Vanderbilt's not going to sneak up on Alabama, this week. But I think they're saying the wrong phrase there. Vanderbilt, they don't have to sneak up on anybody this year. And I'm sure you agree with me on that. I've told people Vanderbilt can beat anybody they play. And there was a point last year, after you beat Alabama, you were saying the same thing until Deion Walker sits on Diego Pavia. But are you with me there that Vanderbilt, they don't have to sneak up on Alabama. They don't have to surprise Alabama on Saturday in order to beat them?
Here's why the point is relevant, because I agree from Vandy's side. I would agree with that of like, they don't, it's like, what's your style of attack? Go back to watching Sandlot, the sneak attack, or are you going to be aggressive in how you're approaching it? They don't necessarily need to have this, oh my God, if Vandy wins this game, it'll be because Bama slept on them. So from that standpoint, I agree with it. where you could point to some actual evidence and data to back it up from the Alabama side is the fact that Kalen DeBoer, during his very brief time at Alabama, has lost 4 games to unranked teams, one of which being Vandy last year. During his entire time as a head coach, he's in year 6 as an FBS head coach. He has just 3 losses to AP top 25 teams. He's got the best record of any active coach against AP top 25 teams, 16-3. And there's a reason why people are phrasing it that way, and why, and I made this point too. It is better for Bama that Vandy is legitimately good, because if Vandy was coming into this game at 3-2 and Diego Pavia is healthy, but they just didn't get the breaks down the stretch against Virginia Tech, or they couldn't necessarily, they fell victim to a beamer ball touchdown at South Carolina. That would be in some ways more worrisome for Alabama, because I would look at what this Tim Beck offense was able to do against Alabama last year and say, I think they could do some of those same things this year. What's saying that they can't? But instead, you have all the motivation in the world from the Alabama side, because it's a revenge game for them. They don't get many opportunities like that. Alabama has only lost to 1 team in consecutive years since 2016. Now, it was last year in 2023 to 2 very different Michigan teams and with 2 different Alabama coaches. Right. But still, it's just a weird way to phrase it from the Vandy side, but I totally get it from the Bama side.
That's a good rebuttal there. Okay, let's go to this matchup, and specifically matchups within the game. I've told a lot of people that it's going to come down to Vanderbilt's secondary against Alabama's skill position players. I'm sure that's kind of universal. I've heard a lot of that throughout the week. Are you watching that one as well? And if not, if you're looking at something else, what are you looking at in this game that come late Saturday night, we're talking about this because Vanderbilt was able to pull it away, or Alabama was able to hold serve?
Yeah, if CJ Hurd gives a Ryan Williams hit to set the tone early on, and it's maybe not quite the level of Major Wright, Florida, Oklahoma national championship over the top hit, because those types of things are whistled these days. But if that type of play happens early on in this game, I'll go, oh boy. They came ready to go. And I think, and I talked to Cole Kublik about this a couple of weeks ago. That's like the most noticeable thing about Vandy, is that they can hit in the trenches very, very well. And I think that it's surprising to some people to see that. Maybe even last year, they weren't quite as good with being able to kind of hang with anybody in the trenches. Alabama is searching for those game records on the defensive side of the ball. They feel like they figured some things out with what they were able to do at Georgia last week. But if they're able to protect Diego Pavia, and if he's able to stretch the field, that's going to be so massive for this one. And obviously, you need that element of the quarterback run game. I need to see what it looks like for Alabama to truly shut that down, because I thought Georgia left some opportunities out there with Gunnar Stockton. I thought they should have been able to utilize his legs more. I need to see, not if you can turn Diego Pavia into Tommy Castellanos, but if you can turn him into the best, most dangerous, confident version of himself. And I fully expect Vandy to be aggressive. I expect them to be going for it on 4th downs. If they come out with that sort of mindset, that's going to make this a true 60-minute game. And then if that happens, I mean, Vandy's still on the side of making Bama be able to say, oh boy, here we go again. And if those are the conversations that are being had externally, I can only imagine what it's like for people that experienced that loss last year to know that Bama just couldn't deliver that knockout punch. So yeah, that's probably a little bit of a long-winded answer, but I think being able to set that tone early on is just so important for this team.
All right, I got a creative one here for you, and then I want your prediction. If Vanderbilt wins Saturday night, what is the, how far is the national reaction going? I mean, are we talking about Vanderbilt in the playoff? Are we still pumping the brakes? Like, because I'm interested in that. Like, because we talked about it in Columbia. Like, I was talking to people before that one. Like, man, if Vandy gets this done, that'd be incredible. And they just keep upping the ante. What's the national perception if Vandy gets it done?
Top 10 ranking would be imminent. Let's remember too that while Bama has lost these games to unranked teams, Bama's lost 1 game at home in the 2020s. The last time that Kalen DeBoer lost a game as a home team was when he was at Fresno State in 2021. That is a really tough thing to overcome. And just because we watched Texas win at Alabama a couple of years ago, and Alabama has shown these moments of vulnerability against teams that are deemed to be lesser talented, it doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, you can just push Bama around and it'll be easy. So I think all of that context is important. And I think that if Bama doesn't take care of business against Vandy, more people will be talking about Bama than Vandy. Like, let's just call it what it is. We know it'll be what's wrong with Bama. We're back to talking about Kalen DeBoer and all of his issues. And is he ever going to be consistent enough to have like the approval rating that he needs to have long-term success? Like, that's just going to be the national conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But for Vandy, you're talking about top 10. You're talking about playoff. Those playoff odds right now are plus 375 for Vandy. And I made sure to look them up before this game because I wanted to see how that was going to be perceived if that happens. Because all of a sudden, you're kind of looking at that schedule and saying the exact same thing that you said earlier. There's nobody on that schedule that they wouldn't be able to play with. And I think playing Texas as well as Vandy did last year in a game that meant so much to Vandy, I think that also is of significance too. So I think we'd be having all of those conversations. I can't remember. Is it top 10 for the first? I know that they're playing. Mike Rodak had this stat. It was like playing as ranked teams for the first time since 1937. And then it was in the top 10 for the first time since 1948. I want to say Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Right. Yeah, and this would be the first time Vandy beats Alabama back-to-back seasons since 1957, I think.
Crazy. So it's like all of those things, if that happens, we deserve to be talking about Vandy. I know we're going to be talking more about what's wrong with Alabama, but we deserve to be talking about Vandy. And I haven't been willing to put a ceiling on this team yet. I don't know about you, but like when people say like, what's the best version of this Vandy team at season's end? What do they end up looking like? I've kind of given the answer of like, I'm not ready to sit here and tell you that they can't be better than 8-4, because I think if they prove it on this stage, it will, to me, say this is a team that we need to be talking as a real legitimate playoff candidate.
Yeah, no, I said 8-4 before the season, and I'm kind of looking at that going, man, I mean, not that could be a floor. Pavia has to stay healthy, but like this team has proven that they're a potential playoff team. All right, I want to get your prediction for the game. And again, for any Vandy fans that haven't read your piece, it's still on Saturday down south. It's a really good in-depth analysis from Connor on Vanderbilt's season so far, and kind of the contrarian take so far, this week of prep. But Connor, what do you think happens Saturday?
I said all these nice things. Said all these very, very nice things. And I respect it so much. Like I really do. I admire what Clark Lee's been able to do. It's an adapt or die world in college football. And that man has adapted. He spent the last really 22 months adapting to this day and age in college football. Larry Black, who defensive line coach, actually lived on the same floor with him my freshman year of college at Indiana, ironically enough.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, love Larry. And he's, I mean, just it seems like just the best kind of fit for what they're building right now. And so like I'm saying all these positive things. I got Bama winning 35-21. Now, if that happens, and if Vandy moves the ball well enough and is doing things that, I mean, I think we saw Georgia do once they were able to overcome that slow start. And if they're still moving the ball, and Bama's defense, which was very much heralded coming into the year as a potential top 10 unit, I do think, even though that wouldn't be covering the spread, even though that wouldn't be repeating, I do think there would be a group of people that would go, this team can score and they're fun to watch. And man, I don't know what this ultimately turns into at season's end, but it still has my attention. And if you're Vandy, I think at minimum, that's what you're hoping for on Saturday. And you know what? Like, I'll say this too. The people that will say and connect dots if Vandy gets blown out, which I don't think is going to happen. I don't think 35-21 will feel like a blowout. Yeah. If Vandy gets blown out in this game, let's not do Bama, you're next. Let's not throw that meme out there. That was so different, the preamble leading up to it. And to me, if we're making that comp, that is a disservice to those players and those coaches who have done everything in their power to get Vandy back to respectability in this last year and a half. So let's just not do. That's my only wish for the way that Saturday plays out.
Well, I don't know if you saw after Vandy beat Alabama last year, Nephi Lielo, who made that comment, I think he quote tweeted some tweet and said Alabama was in fact next. He said something to that degree. So
it's pretty good. That's pretty good.
I'm sure we'll get something, but Connor, appreciate your time. Enjoy the games on Saturday, and we'll see what happens.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Wrapping up this week's pregame show with a visit from Mike Rodak, covers Alabama for Bama 247, our partner over there with 247 Sports. Mike, this should be fun, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, no problem at all.
All right, I want to start with, well, let's start last year, actually, because I'm interested from the Bama perspective. I'm not sure if you were in Nashville or not for that, but yeah, obviously it stunned the country. But how has the repercussion of that been, and how much has that been talked about this week? I mean, surely it hasn't been talked about much, right?
Yeah, actually a little bit. I mean, it's one of those where I think they're trying to decide how much to play into it, because there's about 25 guys in the team who played in last year's game that are still on the team. So it's not everybody. I mean, there's obviously a good number of players that are gone from last year, but for the guys that were there in the stadium last year, I think like Kalen DeBoer always says, remember the feeling, remember how that felt, and I don't think they're ignoring it in that sense, but this is also a team that kind of sees itself as having a new year. And that's kind of been the whole message, throughout the offseason, is turning the page from last year and everything that happened last year. So I don't think they want to make it all about revenge. I think that probably got into their head a little bit too much in week one, when they had Florida State and they had Tommy Castellanos, who was pretty outspoken, throughout the offseason about beating Alabama, and players before that game were talking about, disrespect will be addressed accordingly. And it wasn't. I mean, it just simply wasn't. And you could say maybe it got too much in their own heads where they were trying too hard to prove somebody wrong or get revenge or whatever it might be. And I think Kalen DeBoer's message is just play your game, have a chip on your shoulder and play like you've played these last 3 weeks after the Florida State game, where there's been a different mentality, a different edge, whatever you want to call it, around this team. So it's a balancing act. That was always Nick Saban's message around here too, was like, he doesn't want players to think about what other people are saying, external factors, as he called it. He just wanted internal factors, just play because you want to be your best. But he would often admit that sometimes revenge is a pretty good factor. So it's somewhere in the middle, I would say, is the answer there.
You mentioned that Florida State game, and we'll stay with this season now. Castellanos, obviously you mentioned the talking, and Florida State gets it done. And, you kind of saw the repercussion of that and in the message board lifestyle. I'm sure, you saw an eruption as every team site typically does after a disastrous loss, going into a season, especially with expectation. But you bounce back a few weeks later, last Saturday at Georgia and get a huge win. How are the Bama fans feeling right now? How would you gauge sort of their overall thought process, especially heading into this game against Vandy?
I'd say definitely more positive than, after the Florida State game, as you would expect. But, there's still, I think, a decent amount of doubt, probably more on the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side. I think people are pretty convinced that what they're seeing from Ty Simpson is real. I think they like what they're seeing out of the receivers, albeit Ryan Williams is probably a subject of criticism right now. So I would say the offense is kind of giving some better vibes to people. The defense is an area where there's a lot of injuries. There's obviously going to be a suspension for the first half of James Smith because of his targeting call. And there's probably some nervous fans just about the defense versus Vandy's offense, which has looked really good. So, again, it's mixed. I think people are obviously skeptical after last year. And this week last year, Alabama was the number 1 team in the country. Jalen Milroe was the Heisman favorite this part last year, and they were coming off that win over Georgia, and everything was feeling good. And then they go to Nashville, and it just kind of falls apart. And then they went to Tennessee and they lost, and they went to Oklahoma and they lost. So there's a decent amount of scar tissue that's probably still around among fans that they want to see more out of this team, that just going to Georgia and winning that game is not enough to erase everything that happened before then. But I think people are also pretty satisfied that you just went to Georgia and you beat a top 5 team. And, the offense is probably a big reason why. So, it's lukewarm. It's definitely not fans going crazy and thinking, Kalen DeBoer needs to be fired if they lose this game, but it's also not through the roof like we're going to win the national championship. Like it's measured right now.
I want to go right back to that defense. You talked about them and some of the concerns on that side of the ball. You mentioned James Smith being out for the first half. A couple of linebackers, Quay Rusaw, Jamarian Latham, are out as well. Defensive lineman Jeremiah Beeman. also. And look, we saw what Castellanos and that Florida State offensive line were able to do with that run game. And, we've seen Kalen DeBoer struggle against running quarterbacks, but I do think that's a little bit overblown. I mean, there's a lot of teams that struggle with running quarterbacks, especially ones that are as good as Castellanos and Pavia. Pavia has torn up a lot of offenses this year. But what specifically defensively has Alabama been struggling with the most, and especially when it does come to running schemes like this one?
Well, there's a few things. I mean, the pass rush was probably the biggest question about this defense going into the season because, the sack numbers were way down last year, and there just wasn't that player on the team that you could just turn to on a third down, like go get the quarterback. They've had that guy. Will Anderson a few years ago was that guy. Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell. Like under Nick Saban, they had just a string of pretty elite pass rushers who came in here, and then that's tapered off. LT Overton is really their best pass rusher, and he had 1 sack last year, if I have it right, from 2024. So it was always about he got the pressures, but he never actually got the sack, and so the pass rush was a big question. They did go off against Wisconsin. They had 4 sacks in that game, but overall, the pass rush is still, I would say, a concern, especially when you lose a guy like Rusaw and then Latham, that were their 2 top Wolf outside linebackers, which is kind of that 4-3 outside linebacker, if you will. So that's still a concern. That hasn't really changed. But then the run defense has also become an issue this year, which cropped up a little bit last year. Probably the Oklahoma game. The Vandy game was another one where, they got some rushing yards. Tennessee last year, but it's been rough between Florida State and Georgia. And Georgia ran the ball pretty well against Alabama. They were averaging about 9 yards a carry at one point in the fourth quarter. That's an issue. And this is not the Alabama of old where there's just layers and layers of depth along their front seven. And, they've been hit by injuries now because of Tim Keenan going down in fall camp at defensive tackle. He missed the first 3 games, and then his backup, Jeremiah Beeman, went down for the season. And they're digging deep at defensive tackle. I mean, there's a freshman on the field in London Simmons. There's a redshirt freshman on the field and Isaiah Fega. They're just turning to whoever they can find. And this is not, Saban era, next guy up's a 5-star. That's not the case anymore. So run defense is an issue. And the perimeter run defense was also an issue against Georgia, where there's some runs that got bounced outside. And, the corners and safeties were at fault. So we'll see. I think the strength of this defense is probably the secondary. But it's also not been tested this year. I mean, opponents have only averaged about 17 pass attempts per game against Alabama, which is the fewest of any team in the last 4 years in college football. So there's not a whole lot of tape right now on quarterbacks throwing down the field against Alabama's secondary. And I think that is something that Diego Pavia will try to do. So I would say the secondary is their strength, but it just there hasn't been enough tape on it yet to really say for sure.
Well, there is a lot of tape on Ty Simpson and what he's been able to do offensively, especially last week against Georgia. 276 yards, 2 touchdowns, ran for a touchdown as Alabama holds on to beat Georgia. They were 12 of 19 on third downs, and I think that's exactly what Vandy was, or maybe it was 12 of 18 last year against Alabama. So Bama flipping the script a little bit, and if they can do that, obviously they've got a great shot. But Ty, a Tennessee kid, so from West Tennessee, his dad Jason obviously coaching at UT Martin. What has anything surprised you, I guess, is how I'll ask that in terms of Ty Simpson, especially last week to go on the road and get that done?
Yeah, I mean, the lack of turnovers is impressive and probably surprising as well, just because you're talking about a guy who this is his first year as a starter. And again, there's kind of a nuance there because this is his 4th year in college football. He's a redshirt junior who waited 3 years to start, which is not something you often see anymore. But it's his first year, and to have not turned over the ball in his first 4 starts in college football is pretty good. And it's a really good group of receivers that he's working with. I mean, this is of the team as a whole. That is the strength of the team. It is Ty Simpson throwing the ball to your receivers because it's not just Ryan Williams. I know he got a lot of the attention this offseason because of what he did, especially early last season, the Georgia game, but their number 1 receiver is not Ryan Williams. It's Jeremy Bernard. That's the guy that Ty Simpson seems to trust the most. He's been probably their most productive receiver over the last 10, 15 games. And he potentially could be a first-round NFL draft pick next year. So That's really the number one guy. And then they went out in the portal and they got Isaiah Horton, who was one of Cam Ward's targets last year at Miami. And he started to turn it on as well, where he's a bigger red zone target, a 6'4" receiver. So if you're asking me, I think Ryan Williams is their third receiver, and he's had some issues with drops. He's had some issues as a blocker, and just the consistency is what they're looking for out of him. Obviously, he's an electric talent. If he catches the ball and can beat somebody, we've all seen that. But play in, play out, he needs to be better. So, and then there's Latsier Brooks as well, the freshman receiver who's a little bit like Jalen Waddle. There's definitely some Jalen Waddle-like qualities, having watched both of them and covered both of them. So that's 4 guys right there. And that's really tough for defenses when you can't just focus on 1 or 2 guys, knowing that Ty Simpson's probably going to find the open receiver third, fourth, whatever it is. So that's the strength of their team. And Ty's been doing really good at staying in the pocket, staying composed, not getting anxious and bouncing outside the pocket, trying to make plays with his feet. I think he did too much of that against Florida State. This coaching staff just wants him to sit back and throw the ball. He can run. He's athletic. He did a lot of that in high school in Martin, Tennessee, but that's not the secret sauce for him in college football. It's his arm, it's his accuracy, it's his ability to get the ball to those receivers. And he's been doing a great job of that these last couple games.
All right, a lot of times I like to ask people, what are the matchups that will decide this game? I've told a lot of people throughout the week that it's Vandy's secondary against Alabama's skill position players. And obviously, if Vanderbilt doesn't come to play, don't think they have a shot in this game. And I mean, you could say that on the Alabama side. That's probably from the Vanderbilt perspective. But what matchups are you watching within this game to ultimately decide, okay, that's why this team won the game?
Yeah, I would start with that as well. I think that's a very good point. And if they can't slow down Alabama's passing attack, Alabama could very easily put up 40, 45 points in Bryant-Denny Stadium. I think that's right on par with what they've done. So I'd say that's a must-have for Vandy. But I think what's also a must-have is some pass rush because Florida State got to Ty Simpson more than any other team has so far this season. I think 19 total pressures in that game. I don't think there's been more than 10 from their last 3 opponents. So getting after this Alabama offensive line is something you can probably do. They've been shuffling a whole bunch of guys through there. They played 8, 9 different offensive linemen in this past game against Georgia. I mean, it was almost a different line every drive. And essentially it's like, we're not just going to hand people jobs if we haven't earned them. And they're trying different people at different spots. And if you're Vandy, you're looking at that and saying, maybe there's an opportunity to get after them. So Miles Capers had a strip sack of Jalen Milroe last year. That was against Elijah Pritchett at right tackle. He's no longer there. He's at Nebraska now, but there's been a revolving door at right tackle. Wilkin Formby started the year. Michael Carroll's been in there. Formby's gone to guard a little bit. So if you are Vandy, I think the pass rush, probably Capers against your right tackle is a pretty important matchup. And then I'll flip it over to the other side of the ball and say Alabama's linebackers, just being able to see the field and see what's happening in front of them correctly, I think is going to be important in this game because their eyes played tricks on them last year against Vandy's offense. And Deontay Lawson at inside linebacker, Justin Jefferson, whoever's at Wolf linebacker, because now that's a question mark with the injuries. Just being able to play the right gap and not make a mental mistake based on what you're seeing is important, but also bring guys down. I mean, this is a defense that's missed some tackles this year. Deontay Lawson, I think, is capable of playing a whole lot better. Their 5th-year Mike linebacker. And I think if he can kind of diagnose some things and blow some plays up, then that can really stagnate, the Vandy offense. It's been pretty terrific so far this year.
All right, prediction time. Who you got in the game, Mike?
I do have Alabama. Now I picked Georgia last week and I was wrong. So who knows? I guess I don't know anything. I picked Alabama to beat Florida State, so I'm 2-2 so far this year. I do have Alabama winning 38-31 was the prediction I had on our site. And it goes back to what I said about Ty Simpson in the passing game. I just think if Alabama is going to go deep this season, I think it's going to be because of what they have at quarterback and receiver. And I think this is a game where they can take advantage of that against Vanderbilt's defense from what I've seen and heard about it. And as long as the defense for Alabama can make at least a few plays against Diego Pavia, I think it kind of comes out a little bit ahead for Alabama. But I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I would not be surprised if Diego Pavia comes in there and makes some plays and the Vandy offense as a whole. But I think at the end of the day, Alabama is just a little bit too equipped, if you will, at wide receiver to lose this game.
Vandy fans may not agree with the pick, but I think we can all agree that this is going to be a high-scoring game, and that the over will likely be hit on Saturday in Tuscaloosa. It should be fun. 2:30 on ABC. Mike, appreciate the time and enjoy your coverage on Saturday.
You got it. Thank you.
That'll do it. Big shout out to all three of those guests: Robbie Weinstein, Connor O'Gara, and Mike Rodak from Bama247. Loaded pregame show for a loaded Saturday of football. But the biggest game is Vanderbilt and Alabama. This is the biggest game in the history of this program, and that's why we got the best pregame show for you. So hopefully you guys were able to listen to this on your way to Tuscaloosa, or if you're listening now, you're almost to the stadium or what have you. Really glad you guys were able to be a part of this, and I want this to continue, right? So again, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Shoot me a DM on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever you can find me. I'm on Instagram as well. Billy Derrick 10@gmail.com is my email. We want to continue to build this community the way we've always done here at Vandy247, and obviously really happy that Joe Bulovas is a part of this family. FanDuel, we're going to keep adding to that, right? And the more Vandy wins, the more that helps us. It helps you, and you guys want to be a part of it. So if you want to reach out to me, there's a lot of different ways to do that. And so feel free to do that. Give us a review and a 5-star rating. That helps us get noticed. If you're listening and haven't subscribed yet, please do. Right now is the best time to subscribe. Vandy247.com. Please do so. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video as well. That helps. Fire away your comments and questions. That is free to do. And again, it's Vanderbilt, Alabama. Enjoy the game, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes of the Vandy 24/7 podcast.